Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Um, I've been thinking about what to do for my next video, and as you know, I don't do these videos unless I have something I want to talk about. And again, it's going to be Jack Kirby. So what I was thinking about lately, because I was looking through some of my books, is his return to Marvel in the 70s, which was a very different time period for him. Because previously, when he was working at Marvel during the late 50s, early 60s, he actually helped form what we know of as today as the Marvel Universe. He co-created and had a lot to do with many of the characters that we know and love today. But then he went back to Marvel in the 70s, and he wasn't so much as a partner of Stan Lee, he was contracted help. And, let's talk about his creative output during that time period. Now, what perpetuated this return to Marvel at the 70s? Because we know he left in the 60s and went to DC because he was, again, disillusioned with the fact that he wasn't getting credit for the work that he had done at Marvel. Stan Lee was basically saying he was creating everything, and Jack Kirby was pretty much one of the creative people who had a pivotal role in that time in Marvel. So he left Marvel, went to DC, and of course at DC he had a long string of creative output at that time, with the New Gods, with his Fourth World Saga, the Demon. He also did the Sandman, and did many other characters, and had such a large creative output. Commandy, but again, he became disillusioned because when he was brought into DC, he was told he would have complete creative or editorial control. And as time went on, that appeared to be not the case. And his books were not selling, or he was told that they were not selling very well, and he became disillusioned. But this started a conversation, and I guess it's estimated around early 1975, he started talks with Marvel about returning. And I guess those talks went well. Again, he was told he'd have complete creative and editorial controls of the books that he did. And by March 1975, he signed a 3-year contract with Marvel. And that announcement that he was returning back into Marvel happened at a convention, which I think was called Marvel Con. And he was brought out, and it was told, and there was a lot of celebration. But then, that was the convention goers at that time found out about the return. And I think books that were released August 1975, not dated, but released, Stan Lee made an announcement in the Marvel Bullpens, which was basically a, hey, this is what's coming up kind of section. And that he would be returning to Marvel and taking over Captain America, which was one of the characters that he first created for Timely back in the 40s, and then brought back or reemerged with back in the 1960s, and had a long run during that time period as well. So he'd be returning that book, but also they talked about a book about gods on Earth that he was going to work on. So the first thing he did when he returned to Marvel was he did a bunch of covers, Fantastic Four, Invaders, Iron Man, Kazar. Because remember, in the 1960s, he was the face of Marvel. Not only did he help create a lot of these characters, but he drew many of the covers that, was key in marketing the books at that time. Well, they brought him back in the 70s, and again around September of 75, he started having a gigantic output creating covers for a lot of books. Also at around September, the same time his covers were coming out in 1975, they had an interview with him in FOOM, which was Friends of Old Marvel, which was their newsletter that they actually physically mailed out to people. And in this, he said, "Why are you coming back?" "Because I want to come back." And again, why do Captain America? Because I think I can do Captain America the way that I want to do Captain America. Well, he did do Captain America. He had a long run, I believe, from issue 193 to 214. And again, these are collected in several omnibuses. There was an original release of Jack Kirby Omnibus, then there was a re-release that included the letter pages, and then another release of that one. And then also they had they have the Captain America omnibuses are Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, which is all the sequential releases of the books. They had one of Captain America that included the Jack Kirby stuff. So you can collect all the Jack Kirby stuff in this one omnibus. I do recommend these omnibuses because the letter columns are just an interesting add-on to this, and there's lots of, and the Foom interview is in this. And again, this is the Jack Kirby, the second release of Jack Kirby Omnibus. The original release does not have the letter pages, and it does not have the Foom interview. But it does also release, and his first issue was released November of 1975. And again, these are actual release dates, not cover dates. So he started doing the monthly comic. But as in June of 1976, they released a treasury-size edition of a long epic story about the 200, it was the bicentennial, and it was the Captain America bicentennial battles. Basically, Captain America time travels through the history of America, showing lots of the important parts of our American heritage. And this features some really great Kirby artwork. And the first part of this is actually inked by Barry Windsor Smith. And it's really astonishing to see Barry Windsor Smith inking Jack Kirby, because you see the meld of both those talents, because you definitely was Jack Kirby, but you can see the influence that Barry Windsor Smith has on those inks. And I really enjoyed this book. I got it when it first came out back in 1976, and I love this story. And again, it was this story and also an Captain America Annual 3 that I had when I was a kid, and I absolutely adored it. Now, the funny thing is, the Captain America books were not well received at the time that they were actually releasing. I mean, yes, there were fans and there were people that loved the fact that Jack Kirby was out, releasing stuff again. But you got to remember, from the time that Jack Kirby left Marvel, there was a whole slew of new comic creators that were coming out. I mean, we're talking about, Neil Adams and Barry Windsor Smith, and a lot of new, more realistic artists. John Buscema had rose up in ranks at Marvel. So the Marvel audience at the time, again, remember, generations, you have those were the days when you actually had generations slipping out and new generations coming in who were buying comics. At that time, they were expecting more sophisticated, where Jack Kirby's artwork was definitely more abstract. I mean, and you can see that in the progression of the Captain America character, from the 1940s to his 1960s to his 1970s. You can see the change in his artwork and how he became from, very loose style in the 40s to kind of really clean and polished in the 60s to much more abstract in the 70s. And again, this did not resonate with a lot of the comic fans at the time. Now, he also, after, while he was doing the Captain America run, and he started publishing a new book called The Eternals. So The Eternals was what Stan Lee had kind of teased in his bullpen article, where he said Gods Among Earth. And this was where Jack Kirby introduced his new cast of characters, which was very influenced by this theory of that aliens basically inhabited the Earth and was watching our progression. So the Eternals was his answer to that kind of theory, or kind of storyline that he wanted to do, where the Eternals were watching and guiding man's, progression. However, the problem with this book at the time was that Kirby did not want it to become part of the regular Marvel universe. He wanted it to be its own thing. And the fans again, wanted it to be a superhero book. Basically, it's Marvel. The closest they ever got was one of the characters fighting a robot of the Hulk. Later on in the Thor books, Roy Thomas actually blended the Eternals and to the Marvel universe. And funny enough, it became one of the Marvel cinematic movies. Not one of the greatest ones, but it became really entrenched in that Marvel universe. So while he was doing Captain America and while he was doing Eternals, he also came out with a Treasury Edition. Again, these are those large-size format books that were coming out in the 70s. Marvel and DC were releasing them. Some of them had reprint material, some of them had new material. He came out with his film adaptation of the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, which is kind of a weird choice because by then 2001 was already about 6 years old at the time, maybe even 7 at the time, but it was a nice clean adaptation and with some beautiful illustrations in a large size format, which that's really when Jack Kirby artwork really shines, in that large size format. And he did that book, and I guess it sold really well. I think I had that as well because, again, it was Jack Kirby and it was big and it was a Treasury Edition. When I was buying books at this young age, there's 2 places, the local grocery store, Victory Markets, and Shirley Apothecary, which is a drugstore that sold comics, and that's where I went for my comics. The grocery store sold DC, and the apothecary sold Marvel, and a lot of times I go there, and almost anytime I saw a Treasury Edition, I begged my mom, "Hey, can you get this?" And my mom was a good mom. She got it for me. So I had a lot of Treasury Editions growing up. But what came out of that Treasury Edition was he started working on a monthly book after that based on the 2001 Space Odyssey concept. Basically, what he did was he took the premise of the monolith that guided man from primitive ape to his modern future technology. But he used this book to demonstrate how the monolith would come back during different time periods of man's progression to give him basically a boost into the evolutionary or technology ladder. It was a really great concept, and out of this book, I think it was issue 8 that he introduced Machine Man, basically his character, brand new character that he introduced into the Marvel universe. And again, this is when he actually created a new character that was introduced into the Marvel universe. And the monthly 2001 book started printing in October of 1976, and Machine Man was introduced in May of 77. Now, basically, he started doing, during this time, he also was working on Black Panther. Black Panther was a character this is another Marvel character that he helped co-create with Stan Lee in the pages of Fantastic Four, and he was returning back to Black Panther to do his type of story. Now, the trouble is, again, we talked about that kind of more adult or more expectations that new comic readers had. And I think it was Don McGregor had just come off a run with Black Panther where, it was Jungle Adventures, and it was a more serious tone book, adventure book, definitely kind of what was considered more modern at the time. But then Jack Kirby took over the character with a new #1, and he did what Jack Kirby does. He's an idea man. He started creating all these weird scenarios and adventures, and that were really kind of fantasy and really off-base science fiction. Like I said, the first story in this book is about the seeking out a bronze frog that initiates time travel, which was insane at the time, but also kind of wonderful as well. So a lot of readers did not know how to take this book. And just kind of, it it was just a different time period, and they were looking for something what they thought was mature. Also at the time, he was working on a Prisoners adaptation. The Prisoner was a miniseries, British miniseries about a agent that gets kidnapped and is made part of a community so that he can't share his secrets because they think that he wants to leave the agency for some reason. And it was really well received, and it's an important series for the time and lots of fun. I recommend anyone watching it. But he worked with this along with Gil Kane, but it never got published. I think you can find some publishing of it now, but at the time it never got published. Now, his run on Captain America finally ended, and then he went on to create some new characters and new books. One of that he picked up was his creation of Machine Man. So he started a run of Machine Man that was started in February of 1978, and it's a fun book. Kind of this, trying to find his place in humanity. Where does he fit? Why he's being hunted by the government. It's a fun book. I really enjoy this book. It has definitely that 70s Kirby artwork, and I do recommend it. However, the book kind of went on hiatus when Kirby finally left Marvel. They did a couple issues where he was in the Hulk, and then it returned back with the same numbering down the road. But Steve Ditko, again, another old 60s Marvel creator who came back in the late 70s to work on Marvel products, and he picked up the Marvel Man. And again, so there is a trade of the Machine Man stuff, and I do recommend it because, again, the first half is all Kirby and the second half is all Ditko. Then the next book he was working on was Devil Dinosaur. Basically, Devil Dinosaur was about a red dinosaur back in prehistoric times, and his companion was a caveman or cave boy called Moon Boy. It was a fun little book. Basically, a lot of stories about survival and clan conflicts. It is kind of fun, and I think maybe Kirby just did this because he wanted to draw a dinosaur a lot. So this was the first issue of this was released in February 1978. During this time period, he was also working behind the scenes on what would be a graphic novel published by a real publisher that he worked with Stan Lee. And he continued to work on this during this time period. But then his contract ended in April of 78. And he had a gigantic creative output during this time. But he was, again, told that his books were not selling. He was not happy with losing, again, he was promised editorial control, but as time went on, he got less and less editorial control, and they were still trying to steer him to do more Marvel project. And he was doing, again, a lot of covers during this time period. I wish they would come out with a collection of just the covers that he did during this time because it was so vast and varied. So he decided, there was probably a mutual agreement that they were not going to renew his contract, and so he left Marvel at that time. And he went on to do a lot of independent work at the time, and then at some point he did wind up back at DC to do some miniseries work. And he also went on to do animation work. One of his most popular animation work was Thundarr the Barbarian. But after his contract expired, there was some releases of work that he'd already done on contract, like What If number 11, who is kind of a funny book. What If you're not sure, if you don't know what that was it was a speculative alternate universe book. What if this and what if that? And his issue of What If 11 was what if the Marvel bullpen became the Fantastic Four? And so it was kind of really funny, and it had really primitive Jack Kirby artwork in it, but it is a lark, and everyone should maybe just look at that for what it is. It's just a fun little book that he put together at that time period. But what came out subsequently in the fall of '78 was this, the Silver Surfer graphic novel. Now, this was again, a graphic novel that was released by Simon & Schuster, licensed by Marvel. And it was available in this trade paperback, but also a hardcover version, which was extremely rare back in the '70s. And then this book right here, it has some really great Kirby artwork, and it has some great Stan Lee dialogue. But in its point of history, it's kind of considered non-continuity. And I couldn't really recommend people buying it. But here's the thing: is you could only buy it used or from eBay. They have not reprinted this book, and I scratched my head and I don't know why, because everything else that I've shown you, obviously I bought as reprints, and they're collected, and some of it is easier to find than others, but it's all available and it's all out there. But the Silver Surfer graphic novel is not out there at all. Now, again, I talked about the expectations young readers had at the time of what the comic should be, and how Kirby was perceived not to meet those expectations because he had that really abstract style artwork. He was not a great dialogue person, and some of the concepts that he came up with were really out there for the time period, and people really appreciated their grounded stories at the time. Well, so part of the problem was the editorial assistants at Marvel at the time, and this is addressed in the introductions portions of the omnibuses by Mark Waid. They were kind of sabotaging Jack Kirby in the background. They were a younger breed. They did not appreciate Jack Kirby's artwork, so in the letter pages, they purposely only picked out the bad letters. And that's a lot of the exposure that Jack Kirby got of his reaction to his artwork at the time. So, it's just sad that people at that time period didn't appreciate what Jack Kirby was bringing to the table. Regardless of what happened back in the '70s, a lot of this stuff that he created on his return, and that's what a lot of people refer to it, this time period in his career was the return, have lasted, and he's created a legacy from these characters that still are around today. There's a new Devil Dinosaur series, so that's been, Machine Man is still a character in the Marvel Universe. The Eternals have been integrated into the Marvel Universe and as part of the MCU. And part of the Eternals was Jack Kirby created the Celestials, which is such a gigantic part of the Marvel Universe. It was Alex Ross's linchpin storyline for his Earth X series. I really think that people don't appreciate what he gave at the time. Also, in Captain America, during that run, he created Arnim Zola, which is a character that's still around today. It's just amazing how the things that he created lasted, even though they were not appreciated at the time. So, also, there are many artists today that recognize his influence on them as their kicking off point. Jim Lee has said this many times. Eric Larson has said it many times, that they wouldn't be comic creators without Jack Kirby's influence. So, I invite you all to explore these books, seek them out, enjoy them for what they are, the fun that they are. So that's pretty much the history of Jack Kirby's return to Marvel in the '70s. Are you familiar with these books? Are you interested in these books? I'd really like to know, again, because I'm fascinated with every time period in Jack Kirby's career. And I'd like to know if there's any time period that you would like me to focus on or create a new video on. I definitely have the resources available to me, and I would like to hear some of your feedback. Now, that being said, there's one other thing. The last video I posted on Love and Rockets had a great response, and I got a lot of new subscribers from that. And I want to say thank you. Thank you for subscribing. I really appreciate it. This channel is not monetized. And I don't do videos a whole ton because I only do them when I come up with a subject that I want to talk about. And so I appreciate anyone who subscribes, and for the subscribers out there that are new, welcome. And if you like this video, like, share, and if you haven't subscribed yet already, please subscribe. I appreciate the audience, and let me know again. Do you want something other than Jack Kirby content? Again, I'm an old guy who does old comics, so that's kind of my wheelhouse. So if there's something older out there that you'd like me to talk about, let me know. I probably have something on that, and I do appreciate it, and thank you for watching.